The moment she said my kids' bikes were a safety threat, I knew this wasn't about safety at all. It was about control, and she wanted total obedience. It started on a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where kids race up and down the sidewalk, laughter echoing between identical houses, chalk drawings fading in the sun. My twins were riding their bikes in lazy circles, helmets on, staying clear of driveways. That's when Karen stepped out, clipboard in hand, HOA badge clipped, like armor. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She pointed. She told me bikes were no longer allowed on community sidewalks, effective immediately. No warning. No discussion. Just a rule she claimed had always existed. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She handed me a violation notice with my address already printed, like she'd prepared for this exact moment. She said the sidewalks were for walking only, that bikes caused visual clutter and risk exposure. My kids stood behind me, confused, clutching their handlebars like they were contraband. I asked where they were supposed to ride. She shrugged and said, "That's not the HOA's problem." Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks at the end of a threat. By Monday, half the neighborhood had notices. Parents whispered at mailboxes. Kids dragged bikes back into garages like they were being grounded. The rule spread fear fast, because fines were steep and enforcement was aggressive. Cameras appeared. Warning letters multiplied. Karen began patrolling mornings and evenings, writing citations like it was her calling. The sidewalks fell silent. No laughter, no chalk, no movement. That silence was what finally broke me. I read every bylaw, every footnote, every vague line about common areas. The rule was real, but so were loopholes. If sidewalks were restricted, nothing mentioned alternative pathways. Nothing restricted private easements, shared greenbelts, or temporary community installations approved by majority vote. And suddenly, an idea sparked, one that didn't break the rules, but bent them so hard they'd never be the same. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my kids to ride freely. But if she wanted bikes gone, I was about to show her what happens when you push an entire neighborhood too far. By Tuesday night, I wasn't alone anymore. What started as my frustration turned into a quiet rebellion humming beneath porch lights and group chats. Parents messaged me screenshots of fines. Teens sent photos of locked bikes. Even a retired couple chimed in, saying they missed seeing kids outside because the neighborhood felt dead. That word stuck with me. Dead. A place built for families, drained of life by one rule enforced by one person with too much power and too little empathy. I invited everyone to an informal meeting in my driveway. No flyers, no official notices, just neighbors pulling up lawn chairs, some holding coffee, others holding anger. We talked, we vented, and then we started thinking. Someone mentioned the unused green belt that ran behind our row of houses, technically classified as landscaped drainage access. Another neighbor pointed out the wide utility easement that connected it to the park on the other end of the block. It wasn't a sidewalk. It wasn't a road. It was common land no one paid attention to. That's when the idea took shape. Not a protest, not a complaint, a solution. If bikes weren't allowed on sidewalks, fine. We'd give them somewhere better. A dedicated path. Safe. Clearly marked. Off the sidewalks entirely. A bike highway. The next few days moved fast. We measured distances. We mapped routes. One dad was an engineer and volunteered to design gentle curves and sight lines. Mom, who worked in logistics, organized schedules and supplies. Teenagers offered labor like it was the coolest mission they'd ever been part of. Even people without kids showed up, because this wasn't just about bikes anymore. It was about taking back the neighborhood. We submitted a proposal to the HOA board, not asking permission, but requesting temporary approval under the Community Improvement Clause. It allowed resident-led projects if they didn't interfere with infrastructure and had majority support. We gathered signatures door to door. Not a slim majority, almost everyone. The board stalled, citing review periods. Karen stayed silent, which somehow felt louder than her usual threats. So we didn't wait. The clause allowed temporary installations during review. We staked the path with small flags, cleared debris, laid down compacted gravel where the ground dipped, painted simple bike symbols on removable boards. Within a week, the outline of something incredible appeared where weeds used to be. When the first kids rode through, ringing bells and cheering, the sound carried across the houses. People came out to watch. Phones came out. Smiles spread. The silence was gone, replaced by motion and joy. Karen watched too, from a distance, arms crossed, realizing, maybe for the first time, that this wasn't something she could easily shut down. The morning the bike highway officially opened, the neighborhood felt different before a single wheel touched the ground. Windows were open. Garages were halfway lifted. There was a low buzz of anticipation, like something big was about to happen, even though no one had announced it. By 9 a.m., kids lined up at both ends of the path, helmets crooked, sneakers scuffing the dirt, bikes rattling with excitement. Parents stood nearby, pretending to be casual while clearly emotional. This wasn't just a path. It was proof that the neighborhood still belonged to the people living in it. The first ride was messy and perfect. A little wobbling, a few near collisions, lots of laughter. Kids sped through the curves, learned where to slow down, figured out how to signal turns. Older teens helped younger ones. Parents walked alongside at first, then stepped back as confidence took over. The bike highway came alive exactly the way we imagined, and better. By noon, the noise reached the HOA office. Karen arrived shortly after. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She pulled out her phone and started recording, walking the length of the path like a detective at a crime scene. She took photos of gravel, of flags, of kids riding, especially the kids. That made something twist in my stomach, but no one told the children to stop. We'd checked the rules twice. Temporary installation, common land, no sidewalks involved, no rule. Broken. That afternoon, violation notices appeared in inboxes anyway. Vague language. Unauthorized use of HOA-managed land. Potential liability concerns. It was classic intimidation, but it backfired. Parents responded with screenshots of the bylaws. Someone forwarded the original proposal and signature list to the entire community. Another neighbor posted a video montage of kids riding, smiling, learning. The comments exploded with support. Even residents from nearby neighborhoods chimed in, asking how they could build one too. Then something unexpected happened. A delivery driver stopped by the path and thanked us. Said he felt safer driving through the area now because kids weren't darting onto sidewalks anymore. A jogger said the bikes made the area feel watched and alive. Even a local police officer, called in by an anonymous complaint, took one look and said it was safer than what had been there before. He told the kids to keep their helmets on and left. Karen tried one last move. She demanded an emergency HOA meeting to shut it down. But when the meeting happened, the room was packed. Standing room only. Parents, seniors, teens, even people who never attended anything before. One by one, they spoke about safety, about community, about joy, about how this path brought people outside again. When the vote came, it wasn't close. The bike highway wasn't temporary anymore. It was approved. Permanently. Karen didn't say a word as she left. The kids rode home under the streetlights that night, ringing their bells like victory songs. After the vote, the energy in the neighborhood shifted completely. It wasn't just about bikes anymore. It was about reclaiming space that had been quietly taken from us. Families gathered on porches to watch the riders. Neighbors who had barely spoken to each other started waving, nodding, exchanging smiles. The bike highway became a stage where the community could interact, free from HOA intimidation. Laughter replaced whispers, and the quiet tension that had gripped the street for months dissolved. The kids took the highway seriously. They started mapping their own routes, racing safely along the curves, timing themselves, learning traffic awareness, signaling turns like miniature pros. Parents pitched in, adding small obstacles for skill practice. Cones, chalk markings, even mini-ramps for older kids who wanted a challenge. It was playful, educational, and, most importantly, inclusive. Every child could join, no matter their skill level or bike size. I noticed something remarkable. Karen stopped showing up. At first, it seemed like retreat. She still sent occasional emails questioning the legality of the path, but the residents responded collectively. The tone had changed. Instead of fear, there was clarity, organization, and support. The neighborhood had become a united front. No single person could intimidate everyone anymore. The path's existence was now a symbol, proof that collaboration outweighed control. Local news caught wind of the story and came by for a short feature. Children rode past the camera with excitement. Parents explained how community involvement saved the project, and the HOA office declined comment. The piece ended up highlighting neighborhood creativity and safety, turning what was initially a petty conflict into an inspiring story about citizen-led initiative. Even city officials took notice. They stopped by to inspect the path, impressed by its layout, safety features, and impact on pedestrian traffic. One remarked that it could serve as a model for other communities dealing with overly strict HOA rules. The path wasn't just a place to ride, it had become an emblem of civic action and family empowerment. At night, when the streetlights cast long shadows across the newly compacted gravel, the highway looked magical. Kids rode under the glow, laughing freely, while parents stood back, content. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt alive again. Karen's attempts to suppress fun and mobility had not just failed, they had unintentionally sparked creativity, unity, and a project that would outlast her complaints. What had begun as a simple rebellion against unfair fines and restrictive rules became something much bigger. A living testament to what happens when a community chooses action over fear. The street, once silent and subdued, now thrived. The final chapter of our story wasn't dramatic. There were no last-minute fines, no confrontations. Instead, it was quiet, powerful and a little magical. Weeks after the bike highway became official, the street had transformed. What had once been a place of tension and whispered complaints was now a hub of laughter, movement, and community pride. The kids rode every evening, their bells ringing, their tires rolling over the compacted gravel, weaving through curves that had been carefully designed by neighbors. Parents no longer hovered nervously. They walked beside the riders, chatting, smiling, enjoying the simple pleasure of watching children play safely. Even teenagers who had once scoffed at rules now joined in, offering tips on turns, balance, and signaling, turning the path into a living classroom. Karen's attempts to intervene faded into irrelevance. She sent a few polite emails, mostly ignored, but she stopped showing up at meetings. Her power, once looming over the street, had been diminished by collective action. The residents no longer feared a single individual. They had built something stronger, a culture of cooperation, resilience, and joy. The city even recognized the path as a small public improvement, and neighbors began sharing ideas for similar projects. Parents from nearby streets asked for guidance on creating safe bike routes for their kids. It wasn't just our victory. It had become a model for community-led change, proving that a united neighborhood could turn restriction into opportunity. Even the smallest gestures mattered. Chalk drawings appeared alongside the path. Seasonal decorations brightened the edges. Little signs reminded riders to signal turns and share the trail. The bike highway was more than a path. It was a symbol, a testament to what happens when a community refuses to be silenced, when creativity replaces fear, when collective action triumphs over arbitrary rules. Looking back, I realized the path had done more than protect our kids' freedom to ride. It had brought neighbors together, strengthened relationships, and reminded everyone that joy and initiative are contagious. What began as a rebellion against one HOA Karen's petty rules became a lasting legacy of empowerment and fun. Our street had been quiet for too long. One person had tried to ban bikes, but instead we created life, laughter, and freedom for everyone. The bike highway still shines under streetlights each evening, filled with energy, stories, and smiles. And every time I see my kids racing along the path, I know one thing for sure. When a neighborhood stands together, even the strictest rules can't stop joy. Enjoying this story of neighborhood triumph? Hit that subscribe button for more HOA battles and clever victories. Like if you loved seeing the kids ride freely, and drop a comment below. What would you build if one rule tried to stop you?